They looked at his hoodie and assumed he was trespassing. They looked at his skin and assumed he was a threat. When the flight attendant sneered, "This cabin is for elite passengers only," Marcus Thorne didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just pulled out his phone. "You are about to hear the story of the most expensive mistake in aviation history. A mistake that cost an arrogant Karen her dignity, a corrupt captain his career, and an entire airline its existence. This isn't just a story about racism. It's a story about power. And you won't believe who was on the other end of that phone call." The humidity of a New York July clung to the jet bridge, but inside the cabin of Sovereign Airways Flight 909, the air was crisp, smelling faintly of recycled oxygen and expensive leather. Marcus Thorne adjusted the cuffs of his hoodie. It was a plain, charcoal grey pullover. No logos. No branding. To the untrained eye, it looked like something picked up from a discount rack at Target. To the textile connoisseur, it was vicuña wool, custom spun in Italy, costing roughly $4,000. But Marcus didn't dress for the untrained eye. He dressed for comfort. He dropped into seat 1A, the prime spot in the first-class cabin of the Boeing 777, bound for London Heathrow. He was exhausted. The last 72 hours had been a blur of boardrooms, acquisitions, and the kind of high-stakes poker played with stock options rather than cards. Thorne Capital had just quietly finalized a silent takeover of a major logistics firm, and Marcus simply wanted to sleep for 6 hours across the Atlantic. He placed his beaten-up leather satchel under the seat. Again, deceptively shabby. Inside was a laptop containing algorithms worth more than the GDP of a small island nation. "Champagne, sir." Marcus looked up. The flight attendant, a young woman named Sarah with a kind but tired face, held a tray. "Just water, please. Sparkling if you have it." "Of course, Mr. Thorne." She checked the manifest. She didn't bat an eye. She was a professional. She saw the name on the list, saw the man in the seat, and did her job. If only everyone on Sovereign Airways had been like Sarah. The trouble began 10 minutes later, just as the general boarding announcement washed over the intercom. The heavy thud of footsteps echoed down the aisle. "I don't care what the app says, Charles. I specifically requested the window on the left side. My chakras are misaligned on the right." The voice was shrill, piercing the calm of the first-class cabin like a dentist's drill. Marcus didn't look up. He had his noise-cancelling headphones on, eyes closed, already drifting off. Excuse me. A manicured hand with long, crimson acrylic nails tapped aggressively on Marcus's shoulder. Marcus peeled one eye open. He slid the headphones down to his neck. "Yes?" Standing over him was a woman who looked like she had been assembled in a factory designed to produce headaches. She was wearing a leopard print blouse that clashed violently with her checkered Louis Vuitton carry-on. Her blonde hair was teased into a helmet of hairspray. This was Eleanor Vance, the wife of a mid-level hedge fund manager, and a woman who treated service workers like furniture. "You are in my seat," Eleanor snapped, gesturing vaguely at the cabin. Marcus checked his ticket on his phone screen. 1A, I don't think so, Mum. 1A is right here." "That's impossible," Eleanor scoffed, looking him up and down. Her eyes lingered on his sneakers, high-end streetwear, but again, casual, and his hoodie. She let out a sharp, derisive breath. "First class is for ticketed passengers. The upgrades for staff family members are usually in row 4 or 5. Marcus blinked, slowly sitting up straighter. The fatigue was being replaced by a cold, familiar, sharp focus. "I'm not staff, and I'm not an upgrade. I purchased this ticket." "Don't lie to me," Eleanor raised her voice. Heads in the cabin began to turn. A businessman in 2B lowered his Wall Street Journal. I fly this route to London monthly. I know the clientele. And you—" She waved her hand dismissively. "You look like you belong in the back, near the toilets." "Ma'am," Marcus said, his voice low, a dangerous rumble. "I suggest you find your actual seat. You're blocking the aisle." "Don't you dare speak to me like that," Eleanor shrieked. She turned around, scanning for an ally. She locked eyes with the purser, the head flight attendant, who was making his way up from the galley. His name tag read Bradley. He was a tall man with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes, gelled hair, and an air of arrogance that suggested he thought he was the pilot, not the cabin manager. "Bradley!" Eleanor cried out, playing the victim instantly. "Thank God. This person is refusing to move from my seat, and he's being aggressive." Bradley Miller had been flying for 20 years. He prided himself on keeping a clean cabin. To Bradley, a clean cabin meant people who looked the part. He looked at Eleanor, expensive jewelry, loud entitlement, and saw a high-value customer. He looked at Marcus, black, young, hoodie, messy bag, and saw a problem. Bradley walked over, his chest puffed out. He didn't look at the manifest. He didn't ask Sarah, who had just served Marcus. He made a snap judgment. "Sir," Bradley said, his tone dripping with false politeness, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." "I just showed it to the other attendant," Marcus said, remaining calm, "and it's on my phone. Show it to me. Now," Bradley commanded. Marcus sighed. He unlocked his phone and held it up. Marcus Thorne. Seat 1A. JFK. LHR. Bradley stared at it. The screen clearly showed a valid first-class ticket. A smart man would have apologized. A smart man would have realized that anyone holding a $12,000 ticket deserves respect. But Bradley wasn't a smart man. He was a man who hated being wrong, especially in front of a woman like Eleanor Vance. "It looks like a screenshot," Bradley said, crossing his arms. "People forge these all the time to sneak upgrades. I need to see the credit card used to book the flight." The businessman in 2B scoffed audibly. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Marcus stared at Bradley. "You want my credit card for a ticket I've already scanned at the gate." "Standard security protocol for suspicious passengers," Bradley lied smoothly. "Suspicious?" Marcus stood up. He was 6'3", towering over the flight attendant. "What exactly makes me suspicious, Bradley? Is it the hoodie, or is it the skin color?" "Don't play the race card with me," Bradley snapped, his face flushing red. "You are disrupting this flight. Mrs. Vance has expressed that she feels threatened by your presence, and quite frankly, so do I." Eleanor chimed in, clutching her pearls theatrically. "He was glaring at me. I don't feel safe sleeping with him right next to me." Marcus looked from Eleanor to Bradley. He actually laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You have one chance," Marcus said softly. "One chance to walk away. Check your little computer. Realize I'm the highest-paying passenger on this plane. And apologize." "Is that a threat?" Bradley stepped back, raising his voice for the benefit of the cabin. "Did you hear that? He just threatened the crew." "I didn't threaten you," Marcus said. "I gave you advice." "That's it," Bradley said, pulling out his radio. "Captain, we have a level 2 disturbance in first class. Passenger is non-compliant and aggressive, requesting removal." Marcus sat back down. He pulled out his phone again. He wasn't checking his ticket this time. He was opening his contacts. He scrolled past names that would make Bradley's head spin. Senators, tech giants, A-list celebrities. He stopped at a contact saved simply as Raymond Board Director. But he didn't call yet. He wanted to see how far they would take it. He wanted the karma to be absolute. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from awkwardness to hostility. The other passengers were whispering. Some were pulling out their phones to record. "You really should just leave," Eleanor hissed at Marcus, leaning over the divider. "You're embarrassing yourself. It's pathetic." Marcus ignored her. He was watching the cockpit door. It opened, and Captain Derek Holland emerged. Holland was an old-school pilot, a man who missed the days when pilots were treated like gods. He was already irritated. The flight was delayed 15 minutes due to cargo loading, and now this. "What is going on here?" Holland barked. "He's refusing to leave, Captain," Bradley said, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. "He threatened me, and he's harassing Mrs. Vance." Holland looked at Marcus. He didn't see the vicuña wool. He didn't see the calm demeanor. He saw a disruption. "Son," Holland said, using a term that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Get your bag. Get off my plane, now." "Captain," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I am a revenue passenger. I have done nothing wrong. Your purser here is fabricating a story because he doesn't like the way I look. If you remove me, you are making a mistake that you will not be able to undo." "Are you telling me how to run my ship?" Holland stepped closer, invading Marcus's personal space. "I am the supreme authority on this aircraft. If I say you go, you go. If you don't walk off, the marshals will drag you off, and trust me, you don't want that." "I paid $12,000 for this seat," Marcus stated. "I don't care if you paid $1 million, Holland spat. "You're off." Suddenly, 2 air marshals, who had been seated in the back, arrived at the front of the cabin. They were large men, efficient and humorless. "Sir, is this the individual?" one marshal asked. "That's him," Bradley said, smiling smugly. "Get him out of here." One of the marshals grabbed Marcus's arm. "Don't touch me," Marcus said sharply. He pulled his arm away. "I can walk." He stood up. He grabbed his bag. He looked at Eleanor Vance, who was smirking, already settling into her seat. His seat. She gave him a little wave. "Bye-bye." He looked at Bradley. "You're going to regret this, Bradley." "Get off," Bradley sneered. He looked at Captain Holland. "I hope you have a good retirement plan, Captain." Marcus walked down the aisle. The walk of shame. He had to pass through the economy cabin to exit the middle door because the jet bridge at the front had been retracted. As he walked past hundreds of people, he felt their eyes on him. Judgment, pity, amusement. "Must be a drug dealer," someone whispered. "Probably drunk," another said. A teenager in row 12 held up a phone, filming his face. Marcus looked directly into the lens. He didn't hide. He wanted the evidence. He stepped out of the aircraft and onto the jet bridge. The humidity of New York hit him again, but it felt colder this time. The gate agent looked confused as he emerged. "Sir, did you forget something?" "No," Marcus said, adjusting his bag. "I didn't forget anything. But Sovereign Airways forgot who signs their checks." He walked over to a quiet corner of the waiting area near the large glass windows overlooking the tarmac. He could see the plane he was just on. Sovereign Flight 909. The baggage handlers were still loading the cargo. Marcus took a deep breath. He unlocked his phone. He didn't call the customer service line. He didn't call a lawyer. He dialed the private number of Raymond Greer. Raymond wasn't just a board director. He was the chairman of the board for Vista Global Holdings, the parent company that owned Sovereign Airways. More importantly, Raymond was Marcus's old college roommate. And even more importantly than that, Marcus Thorne's venture capital firm, Thorne Industries, held 40% of Vista Global's distressed debt. The airline was currently in a fragile negotiation to restructure that debt. They needed Thorne's approval to avoid bankruptcy. The phone rang twice. "Marcus," Raymond's voice came through, sounding surprised. "I thought you were in the air. Didn't you text me you were heading to London for the merger meeting? I was, Marcus said, his voice ice cold. But I'm not anymore. What happened? Mechanical delay? No, Ray. I was just removed from the plane. By the captain. And the purser. At the request of a racist passenger. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A terrifying, heavy silence. You were removed? Raymond repeated, his voice dropping an octave. From Sovereign. My airline. Yes. Accused of having a fake ticket. Called suspicious. Dragged off by marshals. Marcus watched the plane through the window. The engines were starting to spool up. Ray, I'm looking at the plane right now. Flight 909. Marcus, I am so sorry. I will get you on the next flight. I'll upgrade you. No, Ray. Marcus cut him off. You don't understand. I'm not getting on another Sovereign flight. Ever. Marcus, please, this is a misunderstanding. We need you in London. The deal is off, Ray. What? Raymond sounded like he was choking. You can't be serious. If you pull the funding, the restructuring fails. Sovereign goes under. We're talking about 15,000 jobs, Marcus. Then you better think of something fast, Marcus said, watching the plane begin to push back from the gate. Because right now, I'm about to call my legal team and instruct them to call in the immediate repayment of the $400 million loan. You have until the end of the business day. Marcus, wait. Don't do this. Raymond was pleading now. Tell me what you want. Anything. I'll give you the CEO's head on a platter. Just tell me what to do. Marcus watched the plane taxiing. Inside that metal tube, Eleanor was drinking champagne. Bradley was laughing in the galley. Captain Holland was feeling like a king. I want that plane, Marcus said. What? Turn it around, Marcus commanded. Bring it back to the gate. Marcus, I can't. It's already taxiing. The fuel costs, the FAA regulations. Turn it around, Marcus said, emphasizing every word, or I bankrupt the company before it lands in London. Okay, Raymond breathed. Okay, hold on. I'm patching in the CEO and operations control right now. Don't hang up. Marcus lowered the phone slightly, watching the Boeing 737 move toward the runway. It was a battle of wills now, a massive corporation versus one man who had been pushed too far. The fasten seatbelt light was on inside the plane, but the turbulence hadn't even started yet. This is a continuation of the story, the billion-dollar seat. Inside the cockpit of Sovereign Airways Flight 909, Captain Derek Holland was feeling good. The engines were humming a low, powerful thrum as the massive Boeing 777 maneuvered along the taxiway at JFK. He checked his instruments, green across the board. Tower, Sovereign 909, holding short of runway 31 left, ready for departure. Holland radioed, his voice confident. He glanced at his first officer, a younger man named Evans. Let's get this bird in the air. I want to make up that 15 minutes. My wife has a roast waiting for me in London tomorrow. Copy that, Captain, Evans said. But the radio didn't crackle with clearance. Instead, there was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. Sovereign 909, Kennedy Tower, the air traffic controller's voice came back, sounding confused. Cancel takeoff clearance. Hold position immediately. Holland frowned. Tower, say again. We are fully configured and ready. Sovereign 909, I have an override order from your dispatch. They are revoking your flight plan. You are ordered to return to the gate immediately. Gate B14. What? Holland snapped. We have a mechanical issue. The board is green. Negative on mechanical, 909. Dispatch code is Delta Alpha Romeo. Do you copy? Holland went pale. He knew the codes. Alpha meant mechanical. Bravo meant security. Delta Alpha Romeo was a code he had only seen in training manuals. It stood for Director Authority Revocation. It meant the company owners had physically killed the flight. Suddenly, the SATCOM phone in the center console began to ring. It was a jarring digital trill that shouldn't happen during taxi. Holland picked it up. "Captain Holland speaking. What the hell is going on?" "Captain Holland." The voice on the other end was not a dispatcher. It was deep, gravelly, and shaking with suppressed rage. "This is Arthur Sterling, CEO of Sovereign Airways." Holland froze. "The CEO? Calling a cockpit directly? Mr. Sterling, Surely this is a mistake. We are seconds from takeoff." "The only mistake, Captain." Sterling's voice boomed. "Was you removing a passenger named Marcus Thorne from my aircraft? Do you have any idea what you have done?" "The passenger was disruptive," Holland stammered, his confidence evaporating. "He was non-compliant, a security risk." "Disruptive?" Sterling screamed so loud Evans could hear it from the other seat. "That disruptive passenger holds $400 million of our debt. He just called the chairman of the board and initiated a default protocol. If that plane leaves the ground, Sovereign Airways ceases to exist by the time you land. We will be bankrupt. Our stock is already plummeting in after-hours trading because rumors are leaking." Holland felt the blood drain from his face. His hands on the throttle trembled. "Turn the plane around, Holland," Sterling hissed, "and pray that Mr. Thorne is in a forgiving mood, because if he isn't, I'm not just firing you. I will sue you for personal negligence until you are living in a cardboard box. Get back to the gate. Now." The line went dead. Holland stared at the runway. The freedom of the sky was right there, but the weight of the corporate world had just crashed down on his cockpit. "Captain," Evans asked softly, "what do we do?" Holland swallowed hard. He keyed the radio. "Tower, Sovereign 909, requesting taxi back to gate. Administrative issue." In the first-class cabin, the plane lurched as the brakes applied, and the massive aircraft began a slow, agonizing U-turn. "What is happening?" Eleanor Vance looked up from her mimosa, annoyed. "Why are we turning?" Bradley, the purser, forced a smile. "I'm sure it's just a minor technical check, Mrs. Vance. We'll be off in a moment." But Bradley noticed something. The plane wasn't stopping for a check. It was heading straight back to the terminal. And through the window, he could see a fleet of black SUVs tearing across the tarmac, led by a Port Authority police cruiser racing toward Gate B14. Marcus Thorne hadn't moved. He stood by the window, his phone in his hand, watching the giant metal beast crawl back to him. It was a slow submission. The plane docked. The engines whined down. The gate area was no longer empty. It was now swarming. 3 Port Authority police officers stood nearby, looking confused. 2 men in sharp suits, Sovereign Airways crisis managers, were sprinting down the concourse, breathless. But the most important figure was Jessica Pearson, the VP of Operations for the East Coast. She had been in the lounge when the call came from the CEO. She ran up to Marcus, breathless, her face pale. "Mr. Thorne," she gasped, smoothing her skirt. "I'm Jessica Pearson, VP of Operations. On behalf of Mr. Sterling and Mr. Greer, I am profoundly sorry." Marcus looked at her. His expression was unreadable. "Sorry doesn't fix the fact that I was racially profiled and humiliated, Jessica." We know," she said, her voice trembling. "We are ready to do whatever it takes. The plane is here. We can board you immediately. We will upgrade you to the Sultan suite. We will comp the flight." "I don't want an upgrade," Marcus said calmly. "I want justice." The jet bridge door opened. The flight crew usually disembarks last, but this time the door flew open, and the station manager, a frantic man named Greg, rushed out. "Mr. Thorne is here," Greg yelled back into the tunnel. Marcus turned to Jessica. "Here are my terms. If you want me to call off the debt recall, 2 things happen right now. First, The people responsible for this leave the plane. Second, I get my seat back. My exact seat." "Done," Jessica said immediately. She turned to the police officers. "Officers, I need you to escort 3 individuals off that aircraft immediately for endangering the airline's operation." "Who?" the sergeant asked. "The captain, the purser, and a passenger in seat 1A, Marcus said. The group moved down the jet bridge. It felt like an execution procession. Inside the aircraft, the door opened. Bradley was standing there, looking confused. "What is going on? Why are the police here?" Jessica Pearson stepped onto the plane, Marcus right behind her. Bradley's eyes went wide when he saw Marcus. "You! How did you? You can't be back here." "Bradley Miller," Jessica said, her voice like steel. "You are relieved of duty. Hand over your badge. Now." "What?" Bradley laughed nervously. "Jessica, you're joking. I removed a security threat. This man, Jessica interrupted, shouting, "owns the debt that pays your salary. You racially profiled a board-level investor. Give me your badge." The color drained from Bradley's face so fast he looked like a ghost. He looked at Marcus. Marcus just stared at him, cold and impassive. I didn't know," Bradley stammered. He was wearing a hoodie." "Get off my plane," Jessica pointed to the door. As Bradley, shaking and crying, was led off by a junior agent, Captain Holland emerged from the cockpit. He looked defeated. He didn't even argue. He handed his wings to Jessica without a word and walked past Marcus, eyes on the floor. Then Marcus turned his attention to seat 1A. Eleanor Vance was still sitting there. She had her earbuds in and hadn't noticed the commotion at the door yet. She was busy typing a complaint on her phone about the delay. Marcus walked up to the seat. "Excuse me." Eleanor ripped her earbuds out. "Oh my God, you again? How did you get back on? I am calling the police." "The police are already here," Marcus said, gesturing to the officers standing behind him. "But they aren't here for me." "What is this?" Eleanor stood up, bristling. Jessica Pearson stepped forward. "Mrs. Vance, you have been identified as the instigator of a hate bias incident aboard a commercial aircraft. Sovereign Airways is exercising its right to refuse transport." "Refuse transport?" Eleanor screeched. "Do you know who my husband is? He is Charles Vance. He works at Goldman." Marcus pulled out his phone again. "Charles Vance, senior analyst in risk management?" Eleanor faltered. "Yes. And he will destroy you." "I'm actually texting his boss, David Solomon, right now," Marcus said, typing casually. "David and I play squash on Thursdays. I'm asking David if Goldman Sachs supports the kind of behavior you displayed today." Marcus held up the phone. The screen showed a reply from David. "Absolutely not. Send me the details. We have a zero-tolerance policy." Eleanor looked at the phone, then at Marcus. The arrogance crumbled. Fear took over. "Please," she whispered. I had a long day. I didn't mean—" "You judged me by my cover," Marcus said softly. "And now you're going to be judged by your actions. Get off the plane." "Mom, let's go," the police sergeant said, taking her elbow. "My bag! My Louis Vuitton!" Eleanor wailed as she was escorted down the aisle. The entire first-class cabin watched in stunned silence. The businessman in 2B, the one who had scoffed earlier, looked at Marcus with awe. Marcus looked at the empty seat 1A. Sarah, the kind flight attendant from earlier, was standing nearby, looking terrified that she was next. Marcus turned to her and smiled gently. "Sarah, right?" "Yes, sir," she squeaked. "You were the only one who treated me with respect. Who checked the list instead of my clothes?" Marcus turned to Jessica Pearson. "Jessica, who is the new captain?" "Captain Rogers is on reserve. He's 5 minutes away," Jessica said. "Good." "And who is the new purser?" Marcus asked. Jessica looked at the crew roster. "We can pull someone from—" "No," Marcus pointed to Sarah. "Promote her. Sarah is the new purser for this flight, and give her a raise effective immediately." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes. Marcus dropped his beaten-up bag back under seat 1A. He sat down. He adjusted his hoodie. "Now," Marcus said, looking around the silent cabin. "Can we go to London? I have a meeting." The flight to London was the smoothest service Sovereign Airways had ever provided. The replacement captain, terrified of making a mistake, flew the aircraft as if it were made of glass. The cabin crew, led by the newly promoted Sarah, catered to Marcus's every whim. But Marcus didn't want champagne or caviar. He slept. However, while he slept at 35,000 feet, the world below was waking up to the story. The teenager in row 12, a kid named Leo, had uploaded his video to TikTok before the plane took off the second time. He titled it, "Racist Lady and Flight Attendant Kick Off Black Billionaire. Then Get Wrecked." By the time Flight 909 was over the Atlantic, the video had 4 million views. The internet detectives went to work. They identified Eleanor Vance. They identified Bradley. They identified Sovereign Airways. The hashtag Sovereign Racism was trending not onto one globally. But the real twist was the business news. While Marcus was in the air, Raymond Greer, the chairman, had held an emergency board meeting. They knew that once Marcus landed, he still held the power to crush them. The debt restructuring was still hanging by a thread. They needed a grand gesture. When the plane touched down at Heathrow, it wasn't just a chauffeur waiting for Marcus. As Marcus walked off the jet bridge, fresh from 6 hours of sleep, he was greeted by a phalanx of cameras. The story had become an international incident. Standing in front of the cameras was Arthur Sterling, the CEO. He had flown in on a private jet just to meet Marcus at the gate. Arthur looked tired. He stepped up to the microphones as Marcus approached. "Mr. Thorne," Arthur said, his voice amplified through the terminal PA system. "On behalf of Sovereign Airways, I want to issue a public apology." Marcus stopped. He looked at the cameras, then at Arthur. He didn't smile. "An apology is words, Arthur," Marcus said, his voice carrying without a microphone. "I'm interested in action." "We agree," Arthur said. He pulled a document from his jacket. "Which is why the board has just voted. Effective immediately, we are restructuring our board of directors. We are offering you, Marcus Thorne, a seat on the board with veto power over all customer service and diversity protocols. And," Arthur paused, swallowing hard, "and we are donating the entire revenue of this flight and matching it 10 times over to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund in your name." The cameras flashed wildly. It was a PR stunt, yes, but it was also a surrender. Marcus took the document. He looked it over. "One more thing," Marcus said. "Anything," Arthur said. "The flight attendants," Marcus said. "They are overworked and underpaid. That creates stress. That creates bad judgment. You're going to raise the base pay for all cabin crew by 15%, starting today." Arthur's eyes widened. That would cost millions. But he looked at Marcus's face. He looked at the debt leverage Marcus held. "Done," Arthur said. Marcus turned to the cameras. "You heard him. If he doesn't do it, I foreclose on the airline next week." The fallout for the antagonists was swift and brutal, detailed in the days following the flight. Eleanor Vance landed in London, not to a vacation, but to a nightmare. Her husband, Charles, had called her the moment she turned her phone on. "Don't come to the hotel," he had screamed. "Goldman suspended me pending an investigation. Do you know how many clients I've lost in the last 4 hours? My face is associated with yours." Eleanor was served divorce papers 3 weeks later. She was also banned for life from every major airline in the One World Alliance. Last seen, she was trying to sue the airline for emotional distress, a case that was thrown out of court in record time. Bradley Miller, the purser, became a pariah. The video of him sneering at Marcus was everywhere. He didn't just lose his job, he lost his career. No airline would hire him. He ended up moving back to his hometown in Ohio, working night shifts at a logistics warehouse. Ironically, a warehouse owned by one of Marcus Thorne's subsidiaries. He was now working for the man he had disrespected. Captain Derek Holland was forced into early retirement. He kept his pension, but his reputation was destroyed. He was stripped of his check airman status by the FAA for failing to properly assess a security threat and allowing a passenger to dictate safety protocols. As for Marcus Thorne, he didn't just save the airline, he transformed it. 6 months later, Marcus sat in the boardroom of Sovereign Airways. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. He was wearing a bespoke suit. But he had his sneakers on. "The quarterly numbers are in," Sarah, now the director of in-flight customer experience, said, presenting the chart. "Since we implemented the Thorne protocol for conflict resolution and raised crew wages, customer satisfaction is up 40%. Revenue is at an all-time high." Marcus nodded. He looked at Raymond Greer and Arthur Sterling. "See what happens when you treat people like humans instead of cargo?" Marcus asked. Raymond nodded respectfully. "We see it, Marcus." Marcus leaned back. "Good. Now let's talk about the new uniforms. The polyester has to go." The wheels of Sovereign Airways Flight 919 kissed the tarmac at Heathrow Airport with a gentle thud, a stark contrast to the turbulence that had occurred on the ground in New York. Inside the first-class cabin, the silence was heavy. It wasn't the silence of sleep. It was the silence of reverence. The remaining passengers in the cabin had spent the last 6 hours stealing glances at seat 1A, where Marcus Thorne lay asleep, a charcoal hoodie pulled over his eyes. They weren't looking at a disruptor anymore. They were looking at the man who had just bent a multi-billion-dollar corporation to his will with a single phone call. As the plane taxied to the gate, the gentle chime of the seatbelt sign echoed. Marcus stirred. He sat up, stretching his arms, his face betraying none of the exhaustion he felt. He checked his phone. It was vibrating incessantly. Hundreds of missed calls, thousands of notifications. The world knew. Sarah, the newly promoted purser, approached him. She wasn't trembling anymore. She walked with a new cadence, the confidence of someone who had been vindicated by a king. "Mr. Thorne," she said softly, placing a hot towel on his tray table. "We are docking at gate 42. The new captain, has been informed that there is a reception committee waiting for you." Marcus wiped his face, the steam invigorating him. "Is it the police?" "No, sir." Sarah allowed herself a small, conspiratorial smile. "It's the board of directors, and the press. It looks like the Oscars out there." Marcus nodded. He stood up, slinging his battered leather bag over his shoulder. He didn't check a mirror. He didn't straighten his hoodie. He wanted them to see him exactly as he was, the man they had underestimated. "Ready, Sarah?" "Ready, sir." The jet bridge door opened, and the flashbulbs were blinding. It was a wall of white light, accompanied by the frantic clicking of shutters and the roar of reporters shouting questions. "Mr. Thorne, is it true you bought the debt? Marcus, are you suing Sovereign? Mr. Thorne, what do you have to say to the CEO?" Marcus walked through the gauntlet, his expression impassive. Waiting for him at the end of the concourse was a group of men in suits that cost more than most cars. At the center was Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sovereign Airways. Arthur looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. His tie was slightly askew, his eyes rimmed with red. Beside him was Raymond Greer, Marcus's old college friend, and the chairman, looking both relieved and terrified. Arthur stepped forward, extending a hand. The cameras zoomed in. This was the money shot. "Marcus," Arthur said, his voice strained, trying to project authority for the cameras. "Welcome to London. We are incredibly sorry for the misunderstanding in New York." Marcus didn't take the hand immediately. He let Arthur's hand hang in the air for 3 agonizing seconds. The shutters clicked furiously. It was a power move, subtle but devastating. Finally, Marcus gripped Arthur's hand. He didn't shake it, he held it. Misunderstanding is a soft word, Arthur. It implies confusion. What happened wasn't confusion. It was protocol. Arthur flinched. "We are reviewing those protocols as we speak." "Reviewing isn't enough," Marcus said, his voice low but picked up by every microphone in the vicinity. "I read your financials on the flight over. You're leveraging 80% of your operational cash flow on debt service, debt that I control. You don't have the luxury of reviewing. You have the necessity of changing." Marcus released the hand and turned to the cameras. He looked directly into the lens of a BBC camera. "Sovereign Airways has a choice today," Marcus announced to the world. "They can continue to be a company that judges its customers by the color of their skin and the brand of their luggage, or they can become a company that understands the value of every human being on their manifest. I am here to ensure they make the right choice." He turned back to Arthur. "I want a meeting. Now, in the airport lounge. Clear the room." Arthur nodded frantically. "Of course. Right this way." As they walked toward the VIP lounge, Marcus stopped and pointed at Sarah, who was standing by the gate door, unsure of where to go. "She comes with us," Marcus said. Arthur blinked. "The flight attendant?" "The director of in-flight standards," Marcus corrected him. "Or she will be, by the time we leave that room." While Marcus was reshaping the future of aviation in London, Eleanor Vance was living through her own personal hell in New York. She had been escorted off the plane by the Port Authority police. They hadn't arrested her. Being a jerk isn't technically a crime, though disrupting a flight crew is. But they had detained her for questioning for 3 hours. When she finally was released into the terminal, she was fuming. She was exhausted, her makeup was smeared, and she had missed her flight. She marched up to the Sovereign Airways ticketing counter, ready to unleash her fury. "I need a ticket to London," she slammed her platinum Amex on the counter, "and I demand compensation for the way I was treated. Do you know who I am?" The ticket agent, a young man named David, looked at her. He didn't flinch. He typed something into his computer. His eyes widened slightly. Then he looked back at her with a strange expression. It was a mix of pity and amusement. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Vance," David said calmly. "I cannot sell you a ticket." "Excuse me?" Eleanor laughed, a high-pitched, incredulous sound. "Run the card again. It has a $100,000 limit." "It's not the card, ma'am," David said. He turned the monitor screen toward her. Across the screen, in bright red letters, flashed a status code. DNR, Level 5, Permanent Ban, Corporate Blacklist. What is this?" Eleanor stammered. "You have been placed on the global no-fly list for Sovereign Airways and its partners," David explained. "This ban was issued directly from the CEO's office about 2 hours ago. It cites malicious conduct and endangerment of high-value stakeholders." "This is illegal," Eleanor shrieked, attracting stares from the queue. "I am calling my husband. He knows the CEO." She snatched her phone out of her bag. She had been ignoring the vibrations for hours. She saw 20 missed calls from Charles. "Finally," she muttered, dialing him back. "Charles, you will not believe—" "Shut up," Charles's voice answered. It wasn't the warm, submissive voice she was used to. It was cold, dead. Just, shut up, Eleanor. Excuse me? Eleanor froze. Are you at the airport? Charles asked. Yes, they banned me. You need to call David Solomon at Goldman and get this fixed. Tell him to threaten their funding. Charles let out a bitter, hysterical laugh. Call David Solomon? Eleanor, David Solomon just called me. He called me into his office personally. Eleanor felt a cold pit form in her stomach. Why? Because, Charles hissed, his voice shaking with rage. Marcus Thorne texted him. Do you know who Marcus Thorne is? He's one of the firm's biggest liquidity providers. He's the man you screamed at, the man you tried to kick off the plane. I didn't know. Goldman Sachs has a reputation to uphold, Eleanor. They don't like it when their senior analysts' wives make international news for bigotry. I've been placed on administrative leave, indefinitely. They're reviewing my entire portfolio. Charles, that's unfair. That's my behavior, not yours. It's our life, Eleanor. Or it was. Do not come home. What? I said. Do not come home. I've already called the lawyer. I'm staying at the club. You can go to your mother's in Connecticut. I don't want to see you. Charles, you can't be serious. Over a flight? Over the fact that you destroyed our life in 10 minutes because you couldn't handle a black man sitting in first class, Charles screamed. Don't call me. The line went dead. Eleanor stood in the middle of JFK Terminal 4. People were walking past her, pulling their luggage, going to London, going to Paris, going home. She was going nowhere. She looked at the departure board, the names of exotic cities blurring through her tears. For the first time in her life, her money, her status, and her husband's name were absolutely worthless. She sat down on her Louis Vuitton suitcase and wept. No one stopped to help her. If Eleanor's fall was social and marital, Bradley Miller's was professional and absolute. Bradley had spent 20 years building a career based on currying favor with the wealthy and looking down on everyone else. He believed the customer is always right, only applied to customers who looked like they belonged in a country club. 2 weeks after the incident, Bradley sat in a small, cramped office in New Jersey. Across the desk was the hiring manager for Boxjet, a bargain basement cargo airline that flew auto parts to Detroit at 3 a.m. It was a humiliation for a man used to serving champagne on the London route, but Bradley was desperate. Sovereign had fired him for cause, meaning no severance, and a permanent black mark on his record. So, Mr. Miller, the hiring manager, a gruff man named Frank, said, chewing on a toothpick, you have impressive experience, senior purser, international routes. Why are you applying to load crates on a night runner? Bradley cleared his throat. He had rehearsed this. I was looking for a change of pace. I wanted to get away from the customer service side and focus on logistics. Frank looked at him over his glasses. He tapped his keyboard. Uh-huh. And you left Sovereign on abrupt terms? It was a mutual disagreement regarding cabin management style. Bradley lied smoothly. Frank turned his monitor around. On the screen was a YouTube video, paused on a frame of Bradley's face, twisted in a sneer, pointing a finger at Marcus Thorne. The title read, The Flight Attendant Who Tried to Fight a Billionaire. The view count was at 12 million. Is this you? Frank asked. Bradley went pale. That video is highly edited. It doesn't show the full context. The context, Frank said, reading from a printout, is that you racially profiled a board member of the company you worked for. You tried to kick him off for wearing a hoodie. I was following security protocol, Bradley insisted, his voice rising. Frank stood up. Mr. Miller, we fly cargo, boxes, crates. But even boxes need to be handled with care. And frankly, you're a liability. If you treat a human being like that, I don't trust you with a crate of fragile electronics. We don't hire liabilities." "Please," Bradley begged, his dignity gone. "I need this. I have a mortgage. I can't get hired anywhere else. I've been blacklisted by Delta, United, American. Even Spirit won't take me." "There's a reason for that," Frank said, opening the door. "Get out." Bradley walked out into the cold rain of the parking lot. He sat in his leased BMW, which he would have to return next week, and stared at the steering wheel. He needed a job. Any job. 3 months later, Bradley found one. He was working the night shift at a massive distribution center in Ohio. The work was back-breaking, lifting heavy packages, scanning barcodes, loading trucks. The pay was $18 an hour. It was 3 a.m. Bradley was sweating through his uniform shirt. He picked up a heavy box marked Priority International. As he scanned the barcode, he looked at the shipping label. Sender, Thorn Industries. Via, Sovereign Logistics. Bradley stared at the label. He was working in a warehouse owned by Marcus Thorn, shipping products on planes owned by the airline he used to fly for. He was literally carrying Marcus Thorn's baggage. He let out a short, dry laugh that turned into a sob. He placed the box on the conveyor belt and watched it disappear into the darkness, just like his old life. 6 months had passed since the billion-dollar U-turn. The boardroom of Sovereign Airways was located on the top floor of a glass skyscraper in London, overlooking the Thames. The atmosphere in the room had changed. The stuffy, old boys club vibe was gone. The heavy oak curtains were pulled back, letting the sunlight flood in. Around the table sat the directors, but there were new faces, younger faces, more diverse faces. At the head of the table sat Arthur Sterling. He looked healthier now, less stressed. Since the restructuring, the stock price had doubled. "All right, next item on the agenda," Arthur said. "The quarterly inclusion report. I believe Director Thorn has the floor." Marcus Thorn swiveled his chair. He wasn't wearing a suit today. He was wearing a black turtleneck and a blazer, still relaxed but sharp. "Thank you, Arthur," Marcus said. He pressed a button, and a holographic chart appeared in the center of the table. "As you can see," Marcus began, his voice commanding the room effortlessly, "since we implemented the Thorn Protocol, incidents of bias-related complaints have dropped by 94%. Employee retention is up 20%, and most importantly, our Net Promoter Score among minority travelers has gone from the lowest in the industry to the highest." He looked around the table. "We stopped training our crew to look for threats and started training them to look for people," Marcus said. "It turns out, treating people with dignity is a profitable business model." Arthur nodded vigorously. "The numbers don't lie, Marcus. You were right. About everything." "Not everything," Marcus corrected him. "I was wrong about one thing." "Oh?" Raymond asked from across the table. "What was that?" "I thought I would never fly Sovereign again," Marcus smiled, "but I'm flying out to Tokyo tonight. Flight 800. "First class?" Arthur asked. "Economy," Marcus said. The room went silent. "Economy?" Arthur asked, confused. "Marcus, you own a significant portion of the airline. You have a permanent suite reserved." "I know." Marcus stood up, gathering his notes. "But I want to see how the crew treats the passenger in seat 42B, who's wearing sweatpants and looks tired. Because that's the real test. If they treat him well, then I know my investment is safe. If they don't, well, I might have to make another phone call." The room erupted in nervous but genuine laughter. That evening, Flight 800 to Tokyo was boarding. The line for economy was long. Marcus stood in the queue, wearing his signature grey hoodie and headphones. He held his boarding pass, seat 42B. As he reached the gate, the agent scanned his pass. "Have a great flight, Mr. Thorne," the agent said brightly. She didn't blink at the name. She treated him with the same warmth she had shown the elderly couple before him. Marcus walked down the jet bridge. He entered the aircraft. Standing at the door was Sarah. She wasn't wearing the standard uniform anymore. She wore a pin on her lapel that read, "Chief of Customer Experience." She was doing a spot check on the crew. She saw Marcus and her eyes lit up. "Mr. Thorne," she whispered. "Economy? Really? Keeping you on your toes, Sarah." Marcus winked. "You know," she said, leaning in closer. "We actually have an empty seat in first. 1A is open." Marcus looked toward the front of the plane. He looked at the wide, plush seat where it had all begun. Then he looked back at the crowded aisle of economy, filled with families, students, and tired travelers. "Give it to someone else," Marcus said. "Who?" Sarah asked. Marcus scanned the line behind him. He saw a young man, maybe 20 years old. He was black, wearing a faded band t-shirt and carrying a guitar case. He looked nervous, checking his pockets for his boarding pass, clearly worried about holding up the line. He looked like he expected to be yelled at. He looked exactly like Marcus had looked 20 years ago. "Him," Marcus pointed. "The kid with the guitar. Upgrade him." Sarah smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. "Consider it done." Marcus watched as Sarah intercepted the young man. "Excuse me, sir?" Sarah said. The kid froze, looking terrified. Is my guitar too big? I can gate check it, I'm sorry." "No, sir," Sarah said gently. "Your guitar is fine, but your seat has been changed." "Changed?" The kid's shoulders slumped. "Am I getting bumped?" "You're getting upgraded." Sarah handed him a new boarding pass. "Seat 1A, first class, complimentary." The kid stared at the pass, his jaw dropping. "Me? Why? Is this a prank?" "No prank," Sarah said, glancing back at Marcus, who was already disappearing into the economy cabin. "Just a reminder that you belong here." Marcus walked back to row 42. He shoved his bag under the seat in front of him. He squeezed into the middle seat between a sleeping teenager and a grandmother knitting a scarf. The grandmother looked at him. She saw the hoodie. She saw the skin color. She smiled warmly. "Would you like a peppermint, young man?" Marcus smiled back, taking the candy. "I would love one, Mum." "Thank you." He leaned back, closing his eyes as the engines roared to life. He didn't need the champagne. He didn't need the legroom. He had something much more valuable. He had changed the system. And as the plane lifted off into the night sky, Marcus Thorne slept the sleep of the just, while up in seat 1A, a young musician was sipping sparkling water, dreaming that maybe, just maybe, the world was finally starting to change. Wow! Talk about the ultimate power move. Marcus Thorne didn't just get revenge, he got reform. He destroyed the egos of the people who hurt him, but he built a better future for everyone else. That is the difference between petty revenge and true power. But here is the question I want to ask you guys. If you were Marcus, would you have been that merciful? Would you have given Bradley a second chance? Or would you have made sure he never worked again? And what about Eleanor? Did the punishment fit the crime? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And listen, if you've ever been judged by your appearance, drop a "or" in the chat, because this story is for you. If you enjoyed this saga of justice, business, and karma, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And subscribe with notifications on. We have an even crazier story coming next week about a landlord who tried to evict a tenant, only to find out the tenant owned the building. You do not want to miss that. Thanks for watching. Stay humble, and remember, never judge a book by its cover, because you might just be talking to the owner of the library. See you next time.